We're constantly being asked the same question, especially by novice students. How many words do they need to know in order to speak English fluently? How to calculate vocabulary? It is very controversial that this is even possible. Are tired and tiring, for example, two different words or one? What about Polysemous bear? If I know one meaning, can I say that I know the word? And if I know all 10 meanings, how many words do I know? 1 or 10? And what about the phrases like beat around the bush? Is it one lexical unit, or two separate words, or 4? In recent decades, the counting of words in the language has been approached precisely from the point of view of grouping words belonging to the same word family. For instance, to decide, a decision, decisive, indecisive. And linguists have calculated that there are about 54,000 such language families in the English language, and a university graduate has a vocabulary of about 20,000 word families. And don't forget that not all words are in active use. How are words stored in memory? In order for the words needed during a conversation to be easily extracted from memory, so that they are in your active vocabulary, they must be somehow ordered in our mental lexicon. In memory, a vocabulary is grouped in different ways, although neither alphabetically nor in separate words. Grouped, for example, according to the principle of concrete and general, giraffe, animal, hamburger, fast food, cucumber, vegetable, the principle of one row, red, green, purple, orange, summer, autumn, winter, spring, the principle of opposite meanings, antonymy, easy, difficult, left, right, by collocations, mineral water, age gap, a glass of water, according to the principle of similarity, synonymy, good, great, fantastic, amazing, awesome, a talk, conversation, dialogue, debate, speech, by language families, science, conscience, unconscious, conscientious. Another connection was revealed by analyzing frequent reservations that people make in speech when they are not very focused. Instead of the desired word, another one similar to it is spoken out. For example, expect, expert, accept, excerpt, and this is jokingly called the bath effect, when the head, the beginning of the word, and the legs, the ending, keep sticking out. One more tricky question is what it means to know the word. If I vaguely understand what exposure means, but I don't know for sure, can I say that I know the word? Or, if I can use conscious in speech, but I don't know how to spell it correctly, do I rather know or I don't know the word? Or, I do know the pronunciation, spelling, and meaning of the word prospect, but I am not familiar with either single root forms or phrases with it. Prospective partner, bright prospects, does this count or not? Or, look, I know the informal body, but I do not understand that it oughtn't to be used when communicating with complete strangers. And it also happens that I recognize package holiday in the text without any problems, but in conversation I can't quickly extract it from memory. So, do I know or I don't know this compound? This is a question of active and passive vocabulary, the ability to use the right words and phrases spontaneously and at the right moment. Everything has its time, and as you further study the language and gain new experiences, each word will acquire new features and connections. This is the increase in vocabulary, which over time, with each new level, grows not only quantitatively, but also qualitatively, forming new connections and associations. First, at the elementary level, we learn the word a face, a body part, and everything related to it. Head, ears, nose, mouth, lips, eyes, cheeks, you name it. Then, at the pre-intermediate level, it turns out that there's also a word to face, which is used, for example, in the phrase to face a problem, and others, face to face, on the face of it, meaning at first glance, on first impression, a poker face. And it also turns out there's an adjective, facial, used in combinations of facial features, facial expression, facial mask, and so on. At the same time, we should not forget that in addition to the meaning, compatibility and spelling, the pronunciation of the word plays a huge role. An incorrectly pronounced word leads to misunderstanding between the interlocutors or comical situations and can make all the work of memorizing it worthless. How do you learn and remember new vocabulary in English? Here are some tips from students.
I usually try to learn new expressions off by heart so that I could remember them perfectly, especially when they don't exist in my language.
I've got a memory like a sieve, so I find a mind map or drawing can help. If I have a few key words or an image, it jogs my memory, helps me to remember things.
Because I like acting in my spare time, I often learn certain things like I would learn a script so I can repeat them word for word, you see, using exactly the same words. Stuff like irregular verbs, for example.
At school, we were always taught to learn by rote, to be able to repeat things exactly, even if we do not fully understand them, so that we could repeat things from memory, and I still use that technique to help me remember new vocabulary.
I've got a terrible memory. Most things just go in one ear and out the other, so I always try to make a mental image when I learn new words. Often it's something funny. I find that helps the words stick in my mind better.
My vocabulary study is based on 3 pillars. I use the resources of auditory memory, so I am careful about pronunciation. Secondly, I pay attention to the origin of words so that I get connecting links between languages. And at New Forward School, we are taught to personalise new vocabulary because words and expressions used in a personal context about myself are never forgotten.
Here is a real life story.
Tom and Harry are twin brothers. Tom had set his sights on going to university, but some of his teachers told him his grades were not up to scratch, which means not up to a satisfactory standard or quality. So he decided to work harder, burning the candle at both ends, going to bed late and getting up early and studying long hours. He was treated like a nerd for his overzealous attitude to study and called names, but he did not pay attention to the jokes of classmates. As a result, his work improved in leaps and bounds, progressing rapidly, and he got a place at university, where he met a girl who liked his sense of purpose, and their romantic relationship taught him to treat things more creatively, because life itself is education.
Harry, on the other hand, was naturally clever. When he was younger, all his teachers thought he was on track for a place at university, working on and likely to achieve this goal. He had a good short-term memory which allowed him to memorize huge amounts of information quickly and without much effort. It did him a disservice. In his last couple of years at school, when it was required of him to structure the information, he started getting poor grades and had a lot of ground to make up. A lot of work to catch up, in order to improve. Unlike his brother, though, he didn't work round the clock. All the time tried to find easier ways, like, for example, ChatGPT, and as a result he didn't get into university.
Generally speaking, although idioms consist of several words, they denote one idea, so that in fact each idiom can be equated to one word, or more precisely, one lexical unit. Here are some useful idioms on the topic of teaching and learning, which of course can be used in other contexts, far from education as such. Personally, I've been doing this job for ages, but now they're bringing in new software, which however I'm not finding difficult to use. The main object of education is to knock the bottom out of this idiom.
You can't teach an old dog new tricks.
He wants to say it's difficult to make someone change their way of doing things, especially if they've been doing it for a long time. I also never say,
"You're teaching your grandmother to suck eggs. I've been fishing here for years, so I think I know where the best places are."
never, because I'm neither a grandmother, a desperate housewife, nor a Herzen Pedagogical University graduate.
I'm an English teacher, not fucking Tomb Raider.
When we were younger, we used to want our students to bite more than they can chew. We've learnt our lesson and won't be doing that again. We just don't work with lazy bones or mediocre students anymore. You see, life is too short. But those who try to cheat and deceive themselves about their abilities and ambitions, we simply weed them out and expel as usual. However, I'm not sure this will teach them a lesson in the future.
Gonna keep on walking.